The politically disastrous rollout of Sarah Palin's new book officially started today. But because the book was available to some a few days early, today's actual launch has been overshadowed by ongoing and now intensifying rebuttals, challenges to factual statements made in Palin's book. And it's not her political enemies who are making the biggest splash over what Palin got wrong in the book. The latest, for example, was John McCain himself, who told the Hill newspaper that Palin was wrong when she wrote that the campaign billed her $50,000 for the cost of vetting her as a candidate. Senator McCain telling the newspaper that the general counsel for his campaign was correct when he shot down Palin's paying for vetting claim a few days ago, and further clarifying that the $50,000 legal bill Palin was referring to, quote, was over the Troopergate. McCain saying that what Palin was really paying legal bills for was her own ethics scandal in Alaska, which predated the presidential campaign. It is remarkable to have Senator McCain himself get involved personally in shooting down Palin's claims in her new book, particularly because McCain reportedly advised his staffers and aides to be as low-key as possible in defending themselves against Palin's accusations, reportedly telling them in a conference call on Friday to at least avoid being interviewed about the book on TV. The Rachel Maddow Show, however, has been able to do an off-camera but on-the-record interview with one of Palin's main targets in the book. She is campaign senior advisor Nicolle Wallace. Palin blames her in the book for her expensive wardrobe being charged to the Republican Party, for her disastrous interview with Katie Couric, and for a lot else besides. On the Couric interview, Palin writes that Nicolle Wallace pushed her into that interview for dubious reasons, saying, quote, Nicolle went on to explain that Katie really needed a career boost. She just has such low self-esteem, Nicolle said. She added that Katie was going through a tough time. She just feels she can't trust anybody. I was thinking, and this has to do with John McCain's campaign, how? Nicolle said, she wants you to like her. Hearing all that, I almost started to feel sorry for her. Asked if that was accurate, Nicolle Wallace told us this, quote, the whole notion there was a conversation where I tried to cajole her into a conversation with Katie Couric is fiction. I am not someone who throws around the word self-esteem. It is a fictional description. Katie Couric was selected because we did evening anchors. I did not advocate an interview for anyone I am friends with. Governor Palin was also asked by Oprah Winfrey about the Katie Couric interview.
You do say that it wasn't your best interview. Were you prepped for that interview?
Not so much, because it was supposed to be kind of a lighthearted, fun, working mom, speaking with working mom and the challenges that we have with teenage daughters.
Nicolle Wallace told us that that, too, is not at all accurate. She says, quote, we set up this interview on the day of the UN General Assembly with a walk and talk in front of the UN. It was never made as two working gals. It's either rationalization or justification or fiction. That was supposed to be to highlight her foreign policy savvy in the context of the UN General Assembly. The picture is in front of the UN to highlight her expertise and readiness to be vice president. It wasn't about two working gals. Finally, when asked for her overall reaction to Going Rogue's theme, that the Republican ticket in 2008 would have been more successful if the campaign had just followed Governor Palin's instincts rather than those of people like Wallace and campaign strategist Steve Schmidt, Nicolle Wallace gave us this response, quote, I think she has probably a legitimate complaint that things could have been better conceived and executed. A book about that would have been painful but not entirely unfair. What she gets wrong is this personalization, that Steve Schmidt and I were these lone villains, and that took place entirely in her imagination. Just like the Obama and Clinton campaigns, we were consensus-driven. I think she fixated on me from very early on. She hated me from the beginning. I try not to take it personally. The fact is that she wrote a book based on fabrications. She gave a brilliant convention speech, other interviews that inspired support, but this book is a bizarre fixation on things that everyone else has moved on from. Joining us now is Anna Marie Cox, national correspondent and host of Inside Story for Air America Radio. Hi, Anna Marie. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Rachel.
So you spent a lot of time covering the campaign. You obviously know Nicolle Wallace from then. What do you make of her rebuttal to Sarah Palin? Does that sound like her voice to you?
It sounds very much like her voice to me, and it sounds pretty end of discussion to me, almost about the book in general. I think that Nicolle speaks she has the same feelings about the book that a lot of the other senior staffers have, which is that there are things that sound like they happened, and they involve the same people and the same, scenes, like the UN, but that actually the words that are exchanged in the background to those stories is just not true.
In terms of that last very personal quote from Nicolle Wallace saying, she told us that Sarah Palin hated me from the beginning. From your experience covering the campaign, again, was the relationship between Palin and the staffers quite personally heated or at odds? Was there a lot of personal friction?
See, one of the things that's sort of strange to me in reading the book and reading the back and forth between them now is that at the beginning, I didn't sense that at all. I should say I covered Sarah Palin very briefly and did not get to know her or her staff the way that I got to know the McCain staff, having traveled with them through the primaries and the general election. It was clear by the end of the campaign that there was a lack of patience, let's say, among the senior staffers for Sarah Palin. I never saw it as hate, and I wonder when that started and if it might not have started for Sarah Palin after the campaign was over. And so she sort of projected backwards to the very beginning.
Sarah Palin tells Oprah Winfrey there was no family vote on whether or not to run for vice president when she was asked. Last year she told Fox there was. She wrote that she wanted to do Saturday Night Live. Her own the emails released to Huffington Post from the campaign show the opposite. She says Reagan got us out of a bigger recession that we're in now, and he did it by killing the estate tax, neither of which is true. Are the fact-checking problems with this book, are the disprovable allegations going to be the biggest legacy of it?
Well, actually, I think there are two big legacies from this book, Rachel. I think the fact-checking is obviously a big problem. The other thing is that she gets things wrong, and she lies, and she punches down the entire time. I mean, there's a sailing policy. You never punch down. You lower yourself. She spends the entire book attacking staffers. I mean, people who you and I know the names of, but most people never would hear. And it's very personal, and it's very petty, and I think it's hard to see her ever having a elected, political career ever again. I think that tonight, Rachel, this very night, you and I talking right now, this is as famous and as politically credible as Sarah Palin will ever be.
So when I said last Friday that her star was going to be lower next Friday than it was last week, you think we're peaking?
I think we might be peaking today just because of Oprah. I mean, you are the queen of nighttime television, but, she is the queen of daytime television. I think she might have inched Sarah up a little bit there. But I'd also like to say that all the McCain staffers I talked to, not a single one of them believes that she even wants to run for elected office ever again. They see her as having grabbed as much of the spotlight as she can. She's interested in being as big a celebrity as she can. But I think that there's a fundamental realization. I think she must realize it too. She cannot run for office having written a book like this. This kind of score-settling book, who would ever work for Sarah Palin again after reading this? Yeah,
it's a good point. I should also note for our viewers that we repeatedly and vigorously requested an interview with Ms. Palin herself, and we were not awarded that prize. But we do get to talk to Anna Marie Cox, which is frankly more exciting. Thanks for joining us, Anna Marie.
Well, thank you.
Anna
Thank you, Rachel.
Is a correspondent with Air America Radio and the host of Inside Story there.